Hey, all. Milkman Al here. Looks like Settlers League is gonna last freaking forever. So, I figured I'd give you some weird stuff to kind of keep things fresh, and maybe you can flesh this concept out a little bit better than what I did. So, this is a Storm Burst Decay Occultist. That might sound super weird to you, and that's because it is. So, the way this build works is basically you get a Forbidden Shaco with Decay on it, a high level Decay, and there are some weird interactions that we'll talk about very shortly here that make Decay do a lot of damage. So you can see right here that maybe that doesn't look like a lot of damage, that 300,000-ish Decay damage, but with the way that Stormburst works with it, that ends up being about 4 million DPS that lasts for like 40-something seconds. So the way Decay works is very complicated. So it is neither a hit nor an ailment, so there's not a whole lot of stuff that actually scales it. Um, so you can scale it with chaos damage over time, chaos.multi, generic.multi, and just generic increased damage. So what I've opted to do here, which you can probably see, is I've used Timeless Jewels to get a whole bunch of minion increased damage, and used a Scourge, Terror Claw, to make all of those things apply to me at 150% of their value. So that's sort of the main damage buff that I've gotten here to try to scale my chaos damage. So the biggest problem here, and you'll note that this is more of a concept than a guide, my max hits are terrible. So this character is like really flimsy. I've tried to lean into like life replenish and use petrified blood to mitigate some of that. So basically, anytime I don't get one shot, I am fine. But again, my max hits are pretty low, so the one shots definitely happen. If you can figure out a way to mitigate that problem, I would be very interested in knowing what it is without losing a whole bunch of damage. But this is the best that I could come up with in the limited time that I have. So here you go. Hopefully, you guys can do something really fun and cool with this. So another problem that this build faces is clear speed. With just Stormburst, clear speed is not super great, and then you have to wait for Decay to kill stuff. Most of the time, that's not like a huge problem, but I've chosen to go with big ass explosions to help things die. So, Profane Bloom is super useful for this build because you're scaling straight up damage and just chaos damage a whole bunch. So, if I remember correctly, this does something like 300% of the monster's health when they blow up. Yeah, 282% of the monster's health. And all of my sources of curses have Hex Bloom, so all the curses spread and everything that dies is cursed, so it all blows up, no problem. So that helps with clear speed phenomenally, and we'll kind of run a practice map here in just a little bit. So, Decay mechanics. Promised you some talk of that. So, what Decay does is basically it takes on the properties of the skill that it's linked to. So in this case, Storm Burst has this exploding orbs deal 75% of skill damage for every 4 seconds of remaining duration on it. So when your Storm Burst expires, your Decay is going to do the same thing. So basically how this build works is you scale regular damage, but you also scale skill effect duration. So the more skill effect duration that you have, the bigger of a boost this is. And that all gets super crazy complicated, but the easiest way that I can say to think of it for this build in particular is to take this number right here, the skill duration, divide that by 0.4, multiply that by 75% or 0.75, and then take that number and multiply it by your Decay DPS. So you're just going to have to kind of trust me on this one that this comes out to about 4 million DPS, give or take. So a fair amount of damage, and like I said, this skill duration applies to Decay as well. So it's, 7 times 8 seconds, so that would actually last for like 55 seconds or something. So you can pretty much just one-tap bosses and run around like a crazy person and wait for them to die. which is great. Super cool. Um, so if you want a more detailed take on the decay mechanics, That's Real Nito documented this probably like 4 years ago. He did a much better job than I can and plan to. So his channel is amazing. I would go check that out. He has all sorts of like really cool different mechanics and stuff on there that are very interesting in my opinion. So give him a follow, look it up. Um, so items wise, like I mentioned, I'm going with the Terror Claw here, the Scourge Terror Claw, for the minion damage affecting you. It saves points, even though we're kind of over on this side of the tree. It saves points going up here to get spiritual aid, so you don't have to worry about that. The other weapon, I chose to go against shield because this build doesn't have a whole lot of dot multi in it. So I just did this minion damage. I just crafted this. It was not super hard if you just get the fractured mod on there, and then use essences for the minion damage and just spam until you get the dot multi. Nothing fancy. The lightning bolt triggering when you get a critical strike. You might see over here that my crit is like 17% or so. So this happens enough to make it worthwhile. This is how I apply punishment, because I have Hex Hex Touch and Punishment and Hex Bloom in my weapon. So anytime I crit a boss, and bosses are really the only time that this is mostly applicable, then they get punishment and we do a whole bunch more damage. So Forbidden Shaco is what really drives this build, because it gives you the level 32 decay, and decay scales hugely with level. For some reason, the Forbidden Shaco is extremely expensive this league. I got mine super early on for like 40 chaos, but I think the same Shaco now would cost you like 100 divines or something, so that's insane. But if you can come across one, go for it. Enjoy. It's a super weird build, and you will be the only kid on the block with it. The Doppelganger Guise was part of my bid to mitigate physical damage. So the 35% less physical damage is helpful, and the life regen when hit kind of keeps you from getting sort of piecemealed to death. And here we got maximum frenzy charges, which is important because of Ralakesh's impatience, which you can see there. So that's another way to scale damage, just an extra more damage multiplier, and curse enemies with despair on hit, so I can make sure that everything is always cursed. This I just sort of exploited the mirrored amulets for, for my stats. Basically, it's just dexterity and life here. I did the same thing with recruit life here, so lose some int, evasion rating and all of that, but I got a ton of elemental resistances and damage recoup here to keep me alive. And belt is just a standard belt. So then we've got a bunch of armor-related flasks. I thought about running Determination with this, and I have it, in fact, in my skills, as you'll see somewhere in here. There. But I don't run it. So I'm still, sort of in the throes of figuring out what to do to make this build more viable. One of the cool tricks that I thought was useful for this is the impossible escape with Mage Blood. So you'll notice that I have all of this stuff down here allocated. So this is actually pretty helpful. Extra life, a little more spell suppress, and then the 45% skill effect duration is really nice to have. And that was a pretty cheap jewel, as I recall. So easy to obtain. It's not very desirable for most builds, so you should be able to pick that up without too much problem. This is fairly uncommon, this timeless jewel, but there are other ones that'll work in all, like this slot and here, that will give you a fair amount of minion damage if you don't want to commit quite as many points. But this one is very efficient, because I think this ends up being like 540% increased damage. Let's see, so 150%, so 120, 240, 360, so 480% extra damage, which is a crap load for like 13 points. I think that's 13 points. So let's take this baby for a spin, shall we? Here we go. Let's do this. This is just some random map that I threw in here. I'll show you how it goes. So you'll note that I'm very slow. Movement speed is slow. Storm Burst has a bit of a, like, wind up before it actually starts doing damage and, like, proccing Despair and stuff. Well, I guess we're gonna do a Delirium. Let's go. Nice lag. So you can see kind of how my life just is all over the place. Dips constantly.
I've been itching for a good fight. Mind if I jump in?
But I just kind of like one-tap dudes. Even with the healing on, they just disappear. No. Am I still killing something? No. I'm just gonna run through this as quickly as I can. But you can see how fragile this build is. So it really needs some help. But it does clear screens like that pretty effectively. So if you can get it to work where you're not like constantly fearing for your life, then this would be a fairly fun build to play. But as it is right now, I will say that it's kind of frustrating, and I'm not anywhere near good enough at this game to you know, mathalize things and just like run around and dodge. so I can't mitigate the fact that it's like super squishy very much just out of my own skill. So whoops, that was not good. There we go. So you see that I just hit him once and he dies like instantly after just kind of running around. So that's that. Pretty straightforward. So hopefully that was useful for you. Give it a try. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching. All of my social stuff, if you want to ask me some questions, it's all in the comments. I will link, or sorry, it's in the description. I'll link That's Real Nito's video in there as well. And I'm streaming Wednesdays and Sundays at 8 p.m. Central, so give me a shout. Come by and hang out. Thanks. Hope you enjoyed it.